because of my having met Dr. King, he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot about character, having dignity and integrity. And after having inspired me to go to college, there was much more that I would learn as I continued to serve. But what was the most traumatic experience of my life in that movement was when I participated on the Bloody Sunday March. And that was the first attempt to march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery for African Americans to gain their right to vote. I was the youngest little girl on that march. I'll never forget, after my parents had threatened me out, I was that very disobedient child the entire time. It was nothing that my parents could do with me. It didn't matter how many times that they warned me, how many times they threatened me as that little girl, even my teachers, even how many times they would whip me. I would still slip out of my back door and be a part of that movement because I wanted to see Dr. King. I wanted to be in his midst, and I wanted to be a part of that struggle. And after they had really threatened me about not participating on this march because people were talking about there would possibly be something that would happen to everybody who would participate. And even my best friend Rachel, she said she wasn't going to do it because she didn't want to die. And I went out to Brown's Chapel Church on that particular day, and people were singing freedom songs and praying as they normally would do, and special instructions were given, and then we were asked to go out and line up for the march. And even when I followed the marchers out in front of Brown's Chapel before they would start the march that day, there were many adults still trying to discourage me as that little girl not to participate in this march. But I saw a teacher that I knew. She was the only African-American teacher during that time who stood against the odds. She stood up for what she believed in when no other teachers would do that. And I went to her and I told her that I wanted to participate, and she grabbed my hand and she kind of took me under her arms, and I started marching with her, making my way to the Edmonds Pettus Bridge. And I'll never forget when we had gotten on the Edmonds Pettus Bridge, or made our way to the Edmonds Pettus Bridge on that day, I could see hundreds of policemen with tear gas masks, with billy clubs, state troopers on horses, and the dogs. And naturally, as a child, I would become even more frightened based upon the picture that I saw.
It'll be detrimental to your safety to continue this march, and I'm saying that this is an unlawful assembly. You have to disperse. You are ordered to disperse.
And the leaders of the march, they were told to turn all of the marchers around and go back. However, they refused. And once they refused, racism unleashed this brutality upon us. All of a sudden, the policemen started having the tear gas to burst in the air. You know, when you get tear gas, it's a very bad burning sensation. And sometimes it not only impacts your eyes, but it also impacts your breathing. And after that tear gas had burst in the air over all of the people who were there, people had begun to start running, and then they had the billy clubs just started beating people down as if they weren't human beings. The dogs and the horses had begun to push their way into all of the crowd of the marchers, just trampling over people as if they weren't human. And people had begun to not just bleed, but they were falling, and some even crawling. And of course, me being that little girl, I was trying to run and make my way back home. And as I was running, I could see others running and crying. And I'll never forget the late Hosea Williams, who was one of the leaders of that march, picking me up as I was trying to run. And as he picked me up, my little legs were still galloping in his arms. And I turned to him and I said, "Put me down, because you are not running fast enough." And I remember him just trying to comfort me all the way back to George Washington Carver Homes. And when we got back to George Washington Carver Homes, I remember seeing neighbors who were standing in their doors knowing that something had happened. And their faces were very saddened. And when I got to my door, both my parents were standing in the door, and my dad had his shotgun. And it was as if they were waiting for their child to come home, and they opened up the door when they saw me, and I completely ran between them up the stairs to my room, and they came behind me. And when they came behind to comfort me, I was crying. I was just devastated based upon what I had witnessed and experienced on that Edmonds Pettus Bridge.